yeesh, man, no matter how many messed up things you've seen in your life, I promise you were not ready for what happened in Oxford, Mississippi today. It has nothing to do with football. Like, most of you won't know what I'm talking about, but the ones who know. Nothing happens on college campi in the SEC without us knowing. I'm just telling you, our informant network is deeper than the feds. The feds come to us when they're investigating illegal activity on southern campuses, /campi, plural of campus. So, yeah, I'm not going to do a segment on it tonight, but I will speak briefly on it. We're jam-packed. We're high atop just a suntastic downtown Nashville, Tennessee. 74 today, and it's going to be warmer tomorrow. And there's still big chunks of snow on the ground where they plowed the roads last week. Really an amazing time in Nashville. The parody myth in college football, we need to talk about it because I'm told there's a lot of it. You know, the old flattening of the sport, as they say, the competitive balance of the sport, never seen like it's being seen right now. Well, is it true? Because it's one, they used to tell me Flintstone vitamins worked. Did they work? Everyone said they worked. Did they work? I loved them just the same, even if they didn't. Big Ten schedule stuff, got that on the show tonight. Let's see, what else? Got one of those classic, will Kalen DeBoer ever be Nick Saban questions. We lower the pinata, Colin. We always have fun with that. Career advice. It's a big mailbag show, so we got all kinds of stuff. I mean, I've been taken to task by Sam Houston State today. So I've got that. I've got several teams I have circled this year. Connolly came out with returning production numbers. Yeah, it's Tuesday night. It's the middle of February, but we are jam-packed. They're watching us in Dothan, Alabama, Pleasant Grove, Utah, San Angelo, Texas, and Lancaster, South Carolina. Now listen to me. We're not running this show out of a broom closet in Columbus, Georgia anymore. We got a huge audience. There are real consequences to the words that come out of my mouth now. I am aware of the story that is broken out of Oxford, Mississippi today. Oxford has fallen this afternoon. I can't go into further details. It has nothing to do with football. Doesn't even have anything to do with Lane Kiffin, as it turns out. All right, so there's sigh of relief number one. But you got to understand, our network of informants in the SEC specifically are so deep. This is like the biggest show in the SEC by 10 miles. So we have got just throngs of informants on every campus in the SEC. So when this stuff happens publicly, we've known about it for a little while. And so we had gotten wind of this one in Oxford for a little while. Now, if you want to go and you want to take it upon yourself to search it, you go ahead and search it. But you need to understand something. With as popular as our show is in places like Mississippi, chances are, if you combine the girl and the boyfriend and the boyfriend's dad and his family and her family and the extended social circle and the fraternity and sorority, many, many people in the sphere watch this show. So I cannot in good conscience talk about this on air tonight. Have I been clear? I think I've been clear enough as to where I stand, but my goodness, what a story to break. And look, if you're going to have one of these scandals break, do it during football season. Don't do it during February. It's the worst time to do it. What are they going to do? Talk about basketball around here? No, they're about to talk about this instead. So yeah, it's been a rocky day there in the Magnolia State. But that's not what we're leading the show with tonight. I have got bigger fish to fry, and it is in the way of the mailbag. The Pate State mailbag has been open all day. We've just got stacks and stacks and stacks of questions. So I told Jesse and Colin, I want to get to as many of these as we can because we don't have another show until Sunday. So Brandon hit us. He said, for the longest time, I viewed programs like Georgia and Ohio State as recession-proof. However, in this new era of NIL, transfer portal, roster retention becoming more challenging, will we see less recession-proof programs and more rotation at the top of college football? And that reminded me of another question that we had because someone else had a question I saw earlier today about whether there was more parity and would we see more championship teams or teams with a shot to win a national championship. And I was looking at that earlier today because a lot of people say that. A lot of people are saying with the new playoff format and with what the portal has done to big-time rosters, more teams have a chance to win a national championship. Well, I hear that a whole lot. I just don't happen to think it's true. I don't think more teams have a chance to win a national championship. I think the sport at the finish line is just as condensed as it's always been. But it's an illusion because it is very true for two reasons that we have more playoff-capable teams in any given year. The first reason is obvious. We just got way more playoff spots. So we used to have 4 teams. Now we got 12, and we're soon going to go to 14 probably. So yeah, your Arizona States or your Boise's any given year are going to be in, whereas they would not have been in the past. So it creates this idea that the sport has changed because there are more playoff caliber teams. There are just more spots. Any given year, you can go back to 2019 or 15 or 13, and instead of looking at the top 4, look at the top 14, and then 15, 16, 17, and you can imagine how many teams that were not playoff teams would have been playoff teams. But the second part is the funnier part to me, because the second part is we have more championship-capable teams. I don't believe that. I think we have more playoff-capable teams. Championship-capable and playoff-capable are two very different things these days. So think about this. If you look at Georgia, I think this past year they were a really good example of a team whose number 2s really got shaved off of the roster. We were there in spring, and Kirby was talking in spring last year about how we've had our 2s sort of shaved out from under us. And what he means by that, for those of you who don't speak depth chart, is they didn't have a lot of their starters taken from them, but they had a lot of their backups taken. And any given year, these big-time programs run the risk of having their backups taken because Texas's backups or Ohio State's backups or Georgia's backups are good enough to start at most other places. Therefore, it stands to reason a place like, just randomly, Oklahoma State could easily come and pay Georgia's backup left guard to start for them. Just a random example there. It didn't actually happen. But because of that, a team like Oklahoma State, any given year, they can make a run at a playoff spot. They can't make a run in a national championship. Nothing's changed on that front. So you're kind of, it's in the college football GPS. Like we know we're headed to the same destination. It's just it takes us a little different course than it used to. Now, for some people, that's more fun. You know my stance on that. I don't need to rehash that. But for some people, that's more fun. And if that's your flavor, that's your flavor. That's fine. But I don't want to get caught up on the semantics, but it's a very important semantics-based argument. We don't have more teams capable of winning a national championship. We just got more teams capable of making the playoff. The same ones are going to be there. Or, let me rephrase, the same formula to get to the finish line is the one it's been for a while. So Alabama had it for a long time. Georgia's had it for a while. Ohio State's had it. They finally got there, but they've had it for a while. Michigan bottled it up. They've had it. I think Texas has it, but they haven't gotten there yet. I think Oregon has it, but they haven't gotten there yet. But you think about it. Notre Dame is back into that mix again. Clemson was. I'm not sure that they are anymore, and we'll talk about them later in the show, but I'm running out of names. I'm running out of names. So how is that any different than the way I would have talked about the sport 5 years ago or 10 years ago? I probably would have mentioned the same list of 5 or 6 teams. They're interchangeable, but there would have been 5 or 6 teams that I think could win a national championship. So nothing's changed. I know all the follow-ups to that. The follow-ups are, well, Josh, even if the destination has changed, or even if the destination's the same, the journey has changed. Great band. But I don't really care about the journey in college football unless you just mean the regular season, in which case I care about the regular season greatly. You've not given the regular season any more meaning to someone like me. The regular season always had meaning. The regular season had meaning when the AP crowned the national champ. So it's always had meaning to me because if they're playing football on a Saturday in the fall on any campus in America, that's a big deal to me. I never needed a playoff sticker on it. But for the people who do, I don't judge you. We just view the sport differently. We both love it. That's what really counts. We just kind of derive value differently. But I do have a theory. I'm going to float it to you guys, and then I'm going to move on. I do have a theory on this, and that is this 12-team playoff that we just had. It produced Ohio State as the national champ. And the people who supported playoff expansion largely were happy with the product. And the people who didn't want playoff expansion didn't have their mind changed, and there may be like 5% fringe on either side. But I have a theory that a lot of people will end up being unhappy with this expanded playoff, but their unhappiness has just been delayed 1 or 2 years. And my theory is if I did nothing more than change some logos in this past bracket, some of you would feel differently. What I mean by that is Ohio State's the team that ended up going on the run. But Ohio State's not from the SEC. They're a big brand, and there's no love lost nationally from other fan bases towards Ohio State. but they don't elicit the animosity that like an Alabama would. If Alabama, 9-3 Bama, if they would have found a way, if the dominoes fell and they like backed their way into the playoff, and they were the team that got hot and went on a run, and they won the title, how different would you feel about the playoff? I'll give you another example. Let's say that was happening. Let's also say instead of Penn State getting the draw they got, where they faced SMU and then Boise, what if Tennessee got that draw? And Tennessee won the first 2 games, and you ended up with a bunch of SEC teams in the quarterfinal, semifinal round, and it ended up inevitable that you came to realize the system was disproportionately built to benefit the likes of the SEC and the Big Ten, because it is. It's just the Big Ten happened to take advantage of it in year 1, but just as readily, the SEC will end up doing that too. So I'm a believer that the same teams are going to win that have been winning, or the same formula is going to win. Now, if Texas A&M gets that formula figured out, they're capable of inserting themselves. LSU is capable of inserting themselves. USC is capable of reinserting themselves into that conversation. But there's a line, and below that, you've got most of the sport that I don't think at their best is capable of inserting themselves into that conversation. Now, you know my conclusion. You know the bow I always put on these conversations. I'd love to be wrong about that. I don't think I am, but I'd be happy to be wrong about that. But I wouldn't ever recommend you put your faith in the playoff. Zevia? Yeah, at least if you want to be satisfied, I'd put my faith in Zevia. Cream soda flavor. Got a lot of grape in the fridge at home. New flavor. I'm not totally sure if I can talk about it on air yet, Jesse and Colin, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut on it. But it may rival cream soda. I've said too much. I've already said too much. Let me take a sip. Got a long road trip ahead of me tonight, so we don't want to load up too much on the front end, but we appreciate Zevia. Colin, let's move this Big Ten schedule to right now, and then we'll do what we were going to do in a second after that. So, the other night, we talked about the SEC schedule the other night. The Big Ten schedule, though, I got 3 winners and 3 losers from this thing as well. The more we've been combing through this as we do our due diligence in the spring, the more I realize Wisconsin got the shaft in the Big Ten this year. I mean, substantially more than whoever the next biggest loser is. We've got our own internal grading here. Our strength of schedule model has Wisconsin at a 103. To give you an idea of how that compares, the next closest team is a 91, and then an 88, 87, and so on and so forth. So Wisconsin, by a wide margin, I think, got the toughest draw in the Big Ten. On top of the league schedule, they play at Alabama this year. They got that return trip. But listen to this. There's a 4-week stretch on Wisconsin's schedule where they go at Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, at Oregon. They play Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, 2 of them on the road in a span of 4 weeks. And then the other team you just have thrown in there as filler is perennially one of the most physical teams and toughest defenses to play in the league. They play 8 of the top 10 teams in the Big Ten odds in conference play this year. So, again, you load up your conference with 14, 16, 18 teams. This is what ends up happening. USC, I think, is a loser, at least on the schedule strength front. You'll learn this about USC. They play UCLA every year, obviously. So the years where they play UCLA at home, that's going to account for one of their Big Ten games. And because that game's at home, whereas otherwise, obviously, it would have been on the road. Like you want the UCLA game to be one of your road games, because then that guarantees you got fewer other road games on the schedule. But this year, because they play UCLA at home, they got like 4 other conference road games, plus they go to Notre Dame this year. So USC is going to Purdue. That's 2,000 plus miles. Illinois, 2,000 plus miles. Notre Dame, ditto. At Nebraska, ditto. At Oregon is a relatively shorter road trip. It's still like 1,000 miles up the coast. So they play 3 Tier 1 opponents. They are a hot start candidate, or an HSC, as we call it. Missouri State to open. Been looking forward to that matchup. USC has ducked Missouri State for a long time, and they finally sacked up, and so we're going to get Missouri State against USC, and then Georgia Southern, and then Purdue, and then Michigan State. So got a chance to get the snowball rolling down the hill here, there are also 2 5-game stretches. And you might think to yourself, why is that a big deal? Well, it's a 2-bye-week season. So think about just randomly throwing bye weeks anywhere on a schedule. You only play 12 games. To have 2 stretches of 5 games with no bye weeks, kind of tough. But the reason is because they've got a bye, game, bye in the middle of their schedule, and then you got 5-game stretches on either side. Ohio State, I got them as one of the losers here too in the strength of schedule debate. Texas plays in Columbus week 1. We were already getting questions as early as February. The questions are already pouring in. Hey, what game are you going to week 1? First off, we have to name the tour before we decide where we're going to go. Priorities. There is a process around here. We could be at that game. I mean, it would make perfect sense for us to be at that game. They play, Ohio State being they play 3 road games in 4 weeks. Notice Colin's showing you, so they go at Washington, and then that's a West Coast. That's the only West Coast game I think they play all year. Yeah. Then they come home from Minnesota, and then they got at Illinois, at Wisconsin. So that's a 3 road stretch, 4 weeks, never easy. NFL, college, whatever. They play Penn State, Oregon, and, well, actually, they play Michigan. They play Penn State. They don't play Oregon. But those are the other sort of top names in the Big Ten. Penn State, Oregon, and Michigan all have easier draws than Ohio State. That's why I think they're sort of a quasi-loser on the scheduling format. Now, as for winners, Illinois, man. Like, this is Illinois' year. Illinois, they only draw 1 of the 4 Tier 1 teams in the Big Ten. They only play 1 of them. They've got 5 of the bottom 7 teams in the Big Ten odds on their schedule. There is no back-to-back road stretch on their entire schedule. They're very experienced. They're one of the most experienced teams in the country, so keep that in mind. They finished last year very well. At Washington is like theoretically tough because you're from Illinois, so you're going to Seattle to play. But this is a big deal. There's a massive schedule advantage in favor of Illinois there. Illinois is coming off a bye. That's Washington's 6th game in a row, and Washington will be coming off a game at Michigan. So, if you ever had to fly to Seattle to play a game, you want to do it after you're rested and after they're playing their 6th game in a row and they just came back from Ann Arbor. What about Nebraska? No true road game for Nebraska until week 7. They got a neutral site game against Cincinnati, I think. Elsewhere, they don't go on the road until the 11th against Maryland, October 11th. I mean, it's Maryland, Minnesota, 2 weeks in a row. So they got USC at home this year. They got a road game at Penn State. The game at Penn State's the toughest one, at least in terms of road games. You got to be careful with this UCLA game, though. So same thing I just talked about. You got to pay attention to this stuff. Nebraska goes to UCLA on November 8th. UCLA's off a bye. That is Nebraska's 6th consecutive game, and it is their longest road trip of the year. So just something to think about there. And Michigan. I got Michigan as a winner. Let's pay attention to this. There's no Oregon on the schedule. There's no Penn State. There's no Indiana. They play Ohio State at the end of the year. Who cares? They beat Ohio State every year now. It's just kind of tradition around there. There's good optics potential in week 2. So week 2 is a very interesting game. So at Oklahoma, week 2. Oklahoma was very bad last year. There's internal optimism in Norman. They'll be much improved. We'll talk about that later in the show. Let's say that's not the case, though. It's still Oklahoma. It's still a road trip, week 2 in the SEC. So if you go get that, it's really, really good from an optics potential standpoint. You got a new quarterback, a new offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, so maybe they're still figuring things out. Northwestern and Maryland. Those are the 2 teams they play before the Ohio State game. Now, they're both on the road, but it's a good setup. Michigan's got a much better draw, I think, than Ohio State does. Academy Sports and Outdoors is where you can gear up, no matter what, though. That's what I told Colin we were supposed to do a second ago, but got my papers all jumbled up. So, Academy Sports and Outdoors, we like to call it your one-stop shop for life. Not for life in terms of the rest of your life, although that's also applicable. I mean for your life, everything you need in your life. Outside of medical supplies, things of this nature, Not a ton of great food options at Academy, but everything else pretty much you need you can get at Academy Sports and Outdoors. I don't want to send you there to refill your insulin, is what I'm trying to say. But if you want to, keep the blood sugar up, Big League Chew in plentiful supply in the checkout line. Academy.com, if you can't get there in person, see, they challenged me. Alex challenged me to fit Big League Chew and insulin and checking your blood sugar, checking it often, diabetes, etc. They don't think I can fit that into these ad reads, and I can, and I will, and I have, and I could again. Appreciate Academy Sports and Outdoors. They've been our longtime partner. They make the show free. Patronize them. Give them an opportunity to earn your business. We had another question, because it's a mailbag day, so we got questions all over the place. Colin, let me wake my computer back up. Just hold momentarily. I gotta keep the social feeds up to see if any new information is broken out of Oxford as we've been on air. I don't believe in talking about fringe social media rumors on the show, because I know most of our audience does not delve into social platforms regularly. I look at the data. It's pretty incontrovertible. So many of you are out there like, what is he talking about? That should let you know how insane this story out of Ole Miss has been today, that I've referenced it twice on the show. And it's not something you need to know. You'll live the rest of your life just fine not knowing what happened. But if you're curious and the kids have been put to bed, I cannot stress that enough, and the kids have been put to bed tonight, and you just want to go do a little cursory search, Ole Miss Dad, I think, should do it. Maybe a little Mary Kate, whatever you want to search. But, get ready. Make sure the battery's charged. Get ready. All right, we got that question about quarterbacks. I've been waiting on someone to ask this. Yeah, push it to next, Jesse. I had the papers out of order. My bad. So sad. Forbes, not the magazine, but just a regular old person there from Mobile, Alabama, hit us up. He said, what are some of the quarterback battles to watch this spring? Okay, I got 5 situations I'm watching. I don't think all these are battles. You're from Mobile. Got to talk about Alabama. I have done some digging. The shovel's over here in the corner. I think Ty Simpson's the overwhelming favorite to win that starting job. I know there's going to be a lot of talk, as there should be, about the fact that DeBoer, when he was at Washington, he recruited Austin Mack, and Ryan Grubb was there, and they recruited Austin Mack, and so, they've worked with him, they know who he is, and now he's transferred to Alabama, and he's been there a year. I know all that. Knowing all that, I'm telling you, I think it's Ty Simpson's job to lose, and he could lose it. That's what God invented spring football for. So he could lose it. I mean, once upon a time, Jalen Hurts was going to have to wait his turn, and Blake Barnett was going to be the starter, and then he wasn't. However, if I were at FanDuel, and FanDuel was sick enough to put odds on who the starting quarterback is going to be in February, Ty Simpson, minus 650 or so. That's where I'm putting the money right now. I like Ty Simpson to win that job. At Notre Dame, no portal pickup. It's been pretty normal for them to go to the portal last couple of cycles. Steve Angeli, you see him there. We got C.J. Carr in the mix. We got Kenny Mitchie in the mix. I think most people around the program would tell you pretty strong lean to Angeli. We saw him come in the Penn State game, and we were right there watching it, and he looked good. Now, what do we make of a drive or two? Who knows? But I think the pretty overwhelming sentiment around there, going into spring at least, is that's his job to lose. But again, competition's a great thing. And it's not so overwhelming at many of these places that it's a formality. Like, I wouldn't classify it as that. At Colorado, this one will be up in the air. So when Juju Lewis went there, when he committed there, the thinking is, okay, Shadour's gone to the NFL draft. Juju Lewis commits, 5-star quarterback, etc. And so he'll be the starter. He'll just start as a freshman. I think that I'm not going to say he was promised that. I don't know the details of his recruitment, but it seemed like he was under the impression that would be the case. Again, I don't speak firsthand there. And then Caden Salter transferred from Liberty. Now, in 2023, Salter lit it up. In 2024, much different story. I thought something was wrong with him last year. To my knowledge, they didn't confirm that. But, we didn't have it confirmed, quote unquote, that Quinn Ewers was hurt at Texas this year. but yet I kept winking and nodding at you every week when I talked about Texas because everyone behind the scenes knew Quinn Ewers was hurt. It's just Sark never confirmed it, so we didn't really say it. Well, I don't know that they ever confirmed that Caden Salter was hurt, but if he wasn't hurt, then there's got to be some other explanation for why he dipped precipitously in production this past year. So he goes to Colorado. If he regains that 2023 form, I'd expect him to be able to start there. But it'll be a good battle to watch. Ohio State, I don't know that that's a battle. Like, I really expect Julian Sayin to be the starting quarterback there. Former five-star guy, commits to Bama, Saban leaves. He transfers to Ohio State. He's on the team last year, so he's not a true freshman. He'd just be a first-year starter. Tavian St. Clair is a monster, man. We watched both of these guys the last 2 years out in California at Elite 11. St. Clair, hey, look, here's the way I would look at that. If he started as a true freshman, that would mean he beat out another stud, which means he's an extreme stud, an ES. I think that's recruiting terminology, scouting terminology. I'm sure Jordan Reed's saying that a lot in Indianapolis this week. An ES. Got him classified as an extreme stud. So I'm saying Julian Sayin until otherwise noted. Now, you got an offensive coordinator change there. So Chip Kelly's out the door, Hartline elevated. Ryan Day says he's calling the plays. It's his offense. There's still familiarity there no matter what. I'm going Julian Sayin. At Michigan, the big question, the multi-million-dollar question, literally, is will Bryce Underwood start as a true freshman? He doesn't have to. Mikey Keene's on the roster. He has started many, many games. He played at UCF. He's played at Fresno. So it's a good situation. You've got an experienced guy, sort of a veteran guy, and that makes your floor not so low. But the ceiling is, of course, with Bryce Underwood. And he looked different to me than any player that's come out of high school the last few cycles. It was a huge deal when he decommitted from LSU. Now we get to find out. See, the question that you've found out with coaches a lot is if you pay coaches more money, does the fan base expect quicker results? The answer is a resounding yes. Is that a fair way to look at roster construction and team chemistry and whatnot? Not necessarily, but it hasn't mattered. Well, now with the players, since the players are getting paid this much money, especially at quarterback, you will have a lot of people who say, well, you don't have time to develop anymore. We're not paying you to sit on the bench and develop. You could pay the guy $5 million. You could pay him $5 billion. His evolution as a player is going to be what it's going to be. You don't get to toss him in the microwave just because you paid a lot of money for him, you know? And even just saying that sentence, I feel kind of gross. But it's college football right now. It's okay. Hey, good for everybody. We're all making money. Now, next up, tough part of the show. Probably won't have director Colin clip this for the YouTube channel. So, you know, this is just going to kind of live in the live show or the long-form show. And if you listen to the whole thing, it's your reward. I am not perfect. Yep. So since we do the show live, there's no editing. We can't go back and cut stuff out. And it makes it easier, but it makes it more difficult in moments like these. So Sam Houston State, one of the states, the other day caught a stray on the show. They didn't deserve it. It wasn't intentional, but many of you have let me hear about it. Cats on Top hits me up, and he asks, will you apologize to the Sam Houston State fans for saying we're in the FCS? Yes, I will apologize for saying that Sam Houston is in the FCS. They elevated to the glorious levels of the FBS 2 years ago. They went 10-3 last year. They went to a bowl game. A hearty golf clap for everyone involved. The other night, flippantly, I was making a point, I think about strength of schedule or something like that. I just needed a name to pop in my mind really quick, and Sam Houston State popped in my mind. And yes, because they've been FCS my whole life, I mistakenly just mentioned them as an example of an FCS team. I think bigger and more egregious crimes have been committed in my lifetime, but this one I got called out for. Colin, do you have that other tweet, by the way? It got ugly today. All for One CUSA comes and says, that's him just doing Josh Pate things. This is a real tweet. For those of you listening on podcast, this is something someone really said about me. When he's not bragging about eating Vienna sausages to hide his rise to privilege, he's busy licking Power 4 hindquarters at the expense of programs that have to actually earn their successes, successi is the plural, instead of buying them. So I'm not so sure I deserved it, but I got it. So yes, I state my regret. It'll probably happen again, so I'm not going to tell you it'll never happen again, but it was just an innocent mistake, okay? And I apologize, and now my balls are in your court. We move on to a much happier point of the show. Yeesh, it's just brutal out here. Like I said earlier, you don't want to be messing up in February. If you mess up in the football season, because no casuals are watching in February. It's just diehards, and they don't miss anything. And I was just off my game a little bit the other night. Let me take a sip of water right quick. But I think what hurts the most is the Vienna sausage reference, because I hate those things, because I had to grow up on them. So I don't know what a rise to privilege is, because look, I'm wearing the same white T-shirt I've always worn. But you are right. If you think I'm still eating Vienna sausages and scrapping those is reflective of a rise to privilege, I guess it's privilege time around here, because I'm never eating those things again. Next question. We got to move on. Next question. Love for the game, Reed, in other words, from Pittsburgh. He hit me and said, what advice or feedback have you received going into college football's media space? I'm just getting started. I want to know your thoughts. Well, the first thing I'd ask, Reed, is do you love college football? This seems so simple, doesn't it? This seems like an afterthought. Of course, if you want to cover college football, you love college football. You'd be surprised, Reed. You'd be really surprised at how many people are out here covering sports, including college football for a living, who do not love college football. Now, it's the free market, so hey, if you can get a job doing it and you want it, you should be able to have it. But my advice would be, if you don't love this stuff, I would pursue other avenues. If you do love it, then pursue it. But it's always kind of disappointing, when you look at someone, and you see them just like I do. There are people in the sports media world who seem to only come alive when there's a scandal, or, when a coach gets fired, or when there's an investigation. And it's like everything but the game on the field is what they're the most passionate about. I have a theory that's why a lot of these folks dove headfirst into the story about playoff expansion, because it had to do with storyline, drama, intrigue, combating conferences, but it had nothing to do with the play on the field. Same thing exists in the NBA. You got folks who get 10 times more excited talking about a trade than they do the games on the court. And it's because they don't really love the game. They love basically treating it like a Netflix series. They kind of love that, or treating it like politics, because a lot of these folks would rather be covering politics. It's just that when they were, headed down the interstate of media, the political off-ramp was closed, so they had to wait and get off on the next one. It just happened to be sports. So, love it. Make sure you love it if you're going to cover it. Next thing, don't even check your numbers for like 2 years. When I got here and we started the show, and me and Director Colin were doing this thing down in Brentwood, which is in Tennessee, and it was during the middle of COVID. I mean, we weren't even looking at the numbers because we were starting from scratch. And even if you're doing a great job, which we weren't necessarily doing, but even if you're doing a great job, even if you're doing the best show in the world, you don't take off overnight, which is a good thing. Because long term, that means that it takes being the cream to rise to the top. That's a net positive for the space. But in the short term, that means you're going to struggle and you're going to get 23 views, even though you think you just did the best segment of your life. And you may be right about it. You don't get validated by the numbers early on. That'll just depress you. Stack your show for your audience and not yourself. So, big mistake that a lot of people make is they put stuff in their show or they put stuff in their rundown that they want to talk about. But you're not your audience. The audience is the audience. So there are a lot of things that I love that we never talk about on the show. There's a lot of stuff I could do without that we do talk about on the show. Because over time, you guys have definitively told me what you do and you don't care about. So that's the show. These are all very simple concepts. It's just so many people screw them up that If you get the basics figured out, you can really succeed big time. I would say also, and this is a huge benefit, be your audience. I was at dinner last night with someone, and we were talking about the psychology of audience building and, looking for a cheat code or a shortcut. How do you relate to college football fans? Well, here's a secret. Grow up a college football fan. Hang out with normal people your whole life. Go to lunch with your buddies every day who are also working 9-to-5 jobs in West Central Georgia and eat barbecue and talk about college football. It's what normal people who grew up where I'm from do. That is our audience for this show. So I am the audience. So it's not very hard to relate to people when you are those people. Now, if you parasail in from the Northeast and you went to one of the classic journalism schools and you kind of have to tighten the bow tie a little bit, make sure the sweater vest is properly aligned before you go on air, you may struggle relating with these folks. But these are my folks. I am these folks. So there's no struggle. So Reed, I would ask you, before you define the audience that you want to have, are you that audience? And then if you are, the final question is the toughest one. Why would anyone care what you have to say? I always pause when I ask that one. Because when someone asks me that for the first time, it like slapped me in the face. Because that's really what it comes down to. Does anyone care what you have to say? If you walk up to someone and say 2 + 2 is 4, but they don't care, it doesn't really matter that 2 + 2 is 4. If you tell them Mississippi State's going to beat Georgia Saturday, but they don't really care why you think that, it doesn't matter if Mississippi State wins. You got to be able to do the hardest thing in the world, which is make the most stubborn group of people in the world, sports fans, I'm one of them, be willing to shut up and listen to what you have to say. They defer their attention to you. If you've ever hung around normal college football fans, like most of us grew up with and grew up being, you know how hard it is thinking you know everything, thinking we all know everything, to have a guy walk in a room and you say, oh man, I'm going to be quiet and see what he has to say about this. Hardly anyone in your social circle demands that kind of authority from you. So, or commands that kind of authority from you. I'm the same way. So like, you got to become that. And it takes a while. It takes a while, and it's fun. If you love it, it's fun, but it takes a while. So that's some quick advice. And stop at Quick Trip, because they fuel our show. And maybe Reed, one day they'll fuel your show. I've got a long drive home tonight. Multiple Quick Trips on the way. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried that the raisin-free trail mix will be there. I know it will. I'm not worried about the fuel. I know it'll be there. I know the cold brew on tap will be there. You know, they also sent me a Theragun with a Quick Trip logo on it. I know it sounds random and that I'm making it up, but I'm not. It's on my nightstand right now. Let's pull it out of the gutter, please. And then they told me last night we've got 5 more that we're going to give away. So I'm not going to give them away tonight, but this is just a little teaser for Sunday, if I remember, if Jesse reminds me. I'm going to give away 5 of those Theraguns. Now again, it's the most random giveaway imaginable, but it's a Theragun, like top-of-the-line Theragun. Cannell sent me one time, but now I scrapped it because Quick Trip sent me one. And it's got the Quick Trip logo on the side. It's just the most random giveaway product from Quick Trip that you can imagine, but it's great. I'm going to give away a few of them, probably in the live chat Sunday. So it just kind of happened. We appreciate Quick Trip, and I'll see you guys later tonight. Let's move it along. Got a few more questions to. Oh, it's only 38 after, man. I thought we were like an hour in. Okay, we're good. We're good. The DeBoer question, Colin, let's go with that one next. Jim from Hilton Head, South Carolina asked, will Kalen DeBoer eventually get Alabama back to the level of success that Nick Saban created? Well, of course he won't. That sounded rude. Jim, I don't think he will. Was that better? Like, Jim, I doubt anyone will be able to do that. That's a very diplomatic way to answer this. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that we're still very, very closely removed from the Nick Saban era. So whether you're Wayne in Wetumpka or you're Larry in Los Angeles, you probably haven't come to realize how impossible what he did is to accomplish again, especially in the new era of college football. But it's pretty much impossible to accomplish what Nick Saban just accomplished in the new era of college football. And the reason I know that is because Nick Saban knew that. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know all the definitive reasons that Nick Saban chose to retire when he did. I'll leave that to the experts on the internet. But I think you're kidding yourself if you don't think that man took a long, hard look at this sport and said, yeah, this ain't for me anymore. The way I do it, it's not going to work as effectively. There's a standard, there's a level that I want to achieve to, and I'm not sure that the new era of college football is conducive to my ways still working. Now, the more foolish-minded person will look at that and say, what a coward. The more wisdom, the person that's a little wiser will look at that and say, good move, good move. If you don't like the way the pieces are lined up on the board, just quit, just walk away. Especially if you've already won several matches, just walk away. Jim, I don't think anyone will do it. Look at the records on the screen Colin is showing you. That's just what he just did in any era is unbelievable. I think it's the greatest stretch that we'll ever see. I remember telling Feinbaum one time that I always was in awe. Like when I was growing up as a kid, I was always in awe that there were people who were, still mainstream figures in the sports media who covered guys that I viewed to be legendary coaches. You can go to Alabama, like Bear Bryant, a legend at Alabama, Vince Dooley at Georgia, like the guys that I grew up hearing about in the South. Or you could go with Woody or Bo in the Big Ten. I was fascinated that there were like people in my adolescence whose careers had spanned so far back that they covered some of those legends. Well, we don't think about Saban like that. You think about him as the GOAT, you think about him as this and that, but he's still here. He's still around. Some of the players he recruited are still on campus at Alabama now. You see him on TV every Saturday. So you don't view him in like Rushmore context like you will down the road. And 30 years from now, when you're talking to like kids about him, the way you'll talk about him, totally different. So it's kind of hard to contextualize the run he had because it's still so fresh. You can still hear the echoes of it. But to apply that standard to anyone, Kalen DeBoer or Kirby or Napier or Ryan Day or Lincoln Riley or Dan Lanning, it's unfair because they're not competing in the same era he did. And you've got this mechanism right now that while it's built for you to take advantage of, it's also shaving off layers of depth that in a previous era you would have been able to build up. And that was what separated those teams. I remember a couple of playoff games they had. Like I remember a playoff game Saban and Alabama had against Washington one year where it's not aesthetically pleasing. It was just the formula was basically we're Alabama, they're Washington. We have recruited to where some of the threes on this roster are five-star players. All we have to do is lean on them for 4 quarters, and we can just grind out a win. You don't have the kind of competitive depth to grind out wins against other playoff caliber teams as much these days. You just don't have that. So I think that there's not the competitive balance per se. Like there's not going to be 15 random teams all of a sudden winning the national title, but what you will have is the teams that used to average 10-plus wins a year, or the programs like Alabama that used to average 10-plus wins a year. Like you'd never see Saban dip below 10 wins. You've become accustomed to knowing Kirby will never dip below 10 wins. Like at the very worst, you think the elite programs in the sport are recession-proof. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think even for the best of the best out there, you get some bad injury luck, and you don't have that championship caliber depth behind you. Georgia could have a season randomly where they win 8. Oregon could have a season randomly where they win 8 or 9, and it not be that terrible of a year. Bama just won 9. That's not a terrible year. It's not a terrible year in any context, but you have this period where I'm not sure the expectations have been recalibrated yet. They will, and once they are, I think everyone's answer to that question will be very close in line with what I just said. No one's doing that anymore. Saban wouldn't do that. If Saban coached for another 10 or 15 years, I'll give you one better. If I could turn back the clock on age for Nick Saban 20 years and have him be like in his early 50s, but he takes over Alabama today, he's not having a mirror image of the success that he had when he took over in 07. I don't believe. Not going to say anything's impossible, but I don't believe that I don't believe that's possible. They're watching us in Elkview, West Virginia, Chapel Hill, Tennessee, and San Jose, California. Thank you guys so very much. A big week this week. Bill Connolly's returning production numbers came out. And we had a question about it, which I was hoping for, because we always dive into this time of year. A lot of the teams that I end up circling, I circle because I comb through Bill Connolly's numbers. It's on ESPN.com right now. He does a lot of work on this. I don't work for the same company he does, but always like to promote good work. So he does his returning production numbers every year. So a few of the teams I circled, like Clemson, has the most returning production in America this year. Now, that's not number of returning starters. It's snaps, like returning amount of snaps. 81% of theirs return. They're the number one returning production offense in the country. They've got 8 starters back, quarterbacks back, wide receivers are back. 13 of their 18 players with 200-plus snaps on defense are back. So love where Clemson's at. I've spoken a couple of times the past few weeks about how I think this year is almost like immune a little bit from the overall concern I have about them. 2026 and beyond, I have concern about Clemson, but 2025, they are the favorite to win the ACC. They should be. Over in the Big 12, got to like what you're looking at with Arizona State and Texas Tech. Arizona State is the number 2 team in returning production, according to Bill Connolly. Texas Tech's number 4. So at Arizona State, they get Levitt back at quarterback. They got Jordan Tyson back. They're number 2 overall in defensive returning production. So it's a crazy conference. It's a very randomized, variance-laden conference in the Big 12. But there are some themes. There are threads woven in that could be a little clue as to who's going to make a run here. Texas Tech, they just loaded up in the portal. They just opened. Did you see the facilities at Texas Tech? Did you see that building? We have prioritized a trip out to Lubbock. I haven't been there since a church mission trip circa like 2002, so I'm long overdue. Lubbock, Texas, and Rockford, Illinois. I'm long overdue for return trips to both cities, and Rockford doesn't really have a good team right now. The Peaches are an afterthought, and so I got to go to Lubbock to see Texas Tech. But number 1 returning production team on defense, Texas Tech. Boom. What about Illinois? So earlier in the show, we talked about Illinois having a really good scheduling draw in the Big Ten. Well, guess what? They're number 3 in returning production in the country. They are top 10 on offense and defense. Returning production. Luke Altmaier at quarterback is among those players who are returning. 5 of their 6 primary offensive linemen return. They were 5-1 in one-possession games last year. So you just get a bunch of guys who know how to win close games back again. Have you heard the allegations that we are becoming Illini homers? Has anyone heard that? Has Brett Bielema heard that? Because he popped off with those clown emojis last week, and we really haven't heard anything since we've been heaping praise on Illinois. You know, it's almost like when we speak positively about teams, we get ignored, and the radar only goes up, the antenna only goes up when we say something not even negative, but just critical. It could all be in my mind. In the SEC, A&M and Vandy and Oklahoma were the ones that I circled. They're all top 10. Those are the SEC teams that are top 10 in returning production. Now, I'm going to say something quietly, very quietly, because I don't want to create a panic. This is going to be a pretty hot take, so bear with me. It is my belief that Oklahoma could be either very good or very bad this year. Pause for effect. Yes, so that's the hot take with Oklahoma. Now, on the plus side, they get a lot on defense back. If that quarterback offensive coordinator transfer combo clicks, Oklahoma could surprise a lot of people. On the downside, they play like an NFL schedule this year. So there's that. They have, you're going to have to bear with me, Colin. They have the 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. They got the 12th best odds to win the SEC. So FanDuel, not exactly what you would call sold on Oklahoma yet, but returning production looks good. Texas A&M, number 6 overall in returning production. Quarterback, 60 of 65 offensive line starts. That's really what you're looking at there. And some of the areas on defense that they were a little deficient in, they addressed those with the portal. And there are 2 G5s in the top 10. Kennesaw is one of them. The other one's Boise. There's going to be a lot talked about this week about Ashton Jeanty and the NFL Combine and this and that, and he left Boise State. Pretty much everyone else came back. So they look like the favorite again in the G5 ranks. If you're going to pick a team that's going to, bring home that G5 auto bid, shocker, Boise again would be the favorite, which you can go bet at FanDuel right now. There are the odds right on the board. You can go bet that right now. And you can do that because FanDuel is the exclusive odds provider of the show. There is a lot of action over there right now. Basketball, of course. But if you want to just skip right on to fall, you can do that. And it is pre-spring practice for pretty much every team out there. So my advice, if you think you have a good read on how a quarterback battle is going to play out or where a team's going to be deficient, and basically you think you have a read that is counter to what the public thinks, the preview magazine culture, you might want to go look at that odds board right now and go ahead and get some action down on some of the futures and the win totals and the conference odds. Like I did that with LSU, and we've already gotten good early line value on that. So now you don't have to, don't turn your wallet upside down and shake it ever, especially in spring, but just take a look. Lastly, a team here that, doesn't have the best future prospect right now, but we will talk about them because it's a mailbag episode. Dustin hit us. He said, what do you think Arkansas's chances are for an 8-win season? And on the flip side, what are the chances they retain Sam Pittman past this year? I love Arkansas. I love our people there. I love Trey Biddy. For my money, he does the best post-game scene of any beat reporter out there, the walk and talk around Reynolds Razorback Stadium. I'm saying a lot of positive things right now to build you up for the negativity that's coming. Their over-under win total's 5.5. Are they going to win 8 games? My guess would be no. They got the number 3 toughest schedule in FBS, as we see it. They've got 8 teams on their schedule that we classify as either Tier 1 or Tier 2. Their road games, their road schedule this year, they're going to go to Texas, to LSU, to Tennessee, and to Ole Miss. There are teams over the next half decade at the Power 4 level that will not play that kind of road schedule. Arkansas's got it this year. They play Notre Dame in out-of-conference action. They've got A&M at home. They got Auburn at home. They got Missouri at home. They are middle of the pack in returning production. So I'd say that total is pretty unlikely. I would say, man, look, you're good if you hit the over 6.5. So you're good if you win 7 games. Winning 8 or more is tough, very tough. Now, as for Sam Pittman, so his records there have been 3-7. That was a COVID year. So 3-7, 9-4, 7-6, 4-8, and they actually rebounded a little last year, back up to 7-6. But do we expect another little trampoline year here? And if the team's improved because of that schedule, will you know it? And you know how pathetic it is, by the way, that as far back as my mind can go, I don't ever remember saying, boy, you know who's got a workable schedule in the SEC this year? Arkansas, dude. You seen how pillow soft Arkansas' schedule is? I know this is supposed to be random, and the league didn't tell them to schedule Notre Dame. But I know it's supposed to be random, but man, some teams randomly catch the short end of the stick disproportionately. They got back-to-back recruiting classes outside the top 30. I'll just put it this way. Nobody had reason to believe Arizona State was going to the playoff this time last year. The sport surprises us every year. So I always leave room for that possibility. I'll do that with Arkansas. But I'll just say this. If I'm searching for the blinking red light, I don't see it with Arkansas right now. Maybe we're coming out of spring and we're saying that. Maybe we're going into fall and I've got some reason to believe 8 or 9 wins are in the cards. Mima always told me, write your predictions in pencil. Write your opinions in pencil in the spring. Because you got to be ready to erase. Because you got a lot of information that you'll learn. So I've written that in pencil. I've written no to Arkansas winning 8 games in pencil. And as for what they would do with Pittman, I'm not really sure. Not really sure, and that's mutual. That's on his end, on their end. I know the vibe around there is not the best. I know the vibe around the fan base is not the best, which I hate. But let's just keep an eye on it. Not the worst roster in the world. Tough schedule. but something worth keeping an eye on. Appreciate you guys. We do not have a show Thursday night. We will have a podcast-only episode, so make sure you're subscribed to the podcast feed. We'll be back Sunday night. I think that's all I needed to tell you. Yeah, that's all I needed to tell you. So appreciate you so much. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. For producer Jesse, director Colin, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless.